So let me welcome everybody. Welcome to the Future Trends Forum. I'm Brian Alexander, the show's creator and host, chief cat herder for the next hour. I'm delighted to see and hopefully hear all of you over the next hour. We have great guests today with a fantastic topic, and we're really looking forward to it. But before we go into that, let's introduce the forum. Let's explain where it comes from, how it works, how it's supported, and then we'll dive in. So, Tara, let's go to the first slide, please. Now, you should know that the forum is a discussion-oriented place. This is a video conference all about conversation. It's not about presentation. This slide that we'll have here in the next couple, we'll get rid of those in just a couple of minutes. The main purpose here is conversation. And this conversation spun out of the Future Trends in Technology and Education report. And that's a monthly trends analysis that takes a look at about 86 trends across education and technology, trying to get a sense of how these trends are reshaping the future of education. If you haven't seen FTTE, go to ftte.us. You can download some reports and sign up if you like. But again, that's a publication. What we're doing here in the forum is discussion. Now, over to the next slide, please. Now, the forum and the FTTE report are part of a broader project called the Future of Education Observatory. If you haven't seen that, that includes these two functions, along with a blog, along with a book club, along with a lot of online discussion. The idea is to host a multimedia, multimodal, asynchronous, and synchronous conversation about the future of education and technology. We're trying to get as many voices, as many eyeballs as possible, through as many different channels as possible. So if you haven't seen it, go to futureofeducation.us and you can learn more. Now, we can only do this work with the help of some generous sponsors, and we'd like to thank them before we proceed. To begin with, I'd like to thank NYSERNet in New York State. Now, this is a nonprofit that helps keep that state's colleges and universities wired up to the high-speed internet. We're very grateful to them for their sponsorship. We had a meeting with them last month in Cooperstown, New York. Delightful people, they do important work, and again, we're grateful for them. Now, we're also grateful to Shindig, because you can tell Shindig makes available the technology we're using right now. So let me just walk you through it if you're new to it or if you haven't seen it for a while. Right now, where I am and where this slide will be just for a minute is called the stage. This is a spot where everybody can see and hear everything that goes on up here. So in just a couple of minutes, we'll have both guests up here, and you can all join us as well. Think of this as a kind of panel space that everyone can watch and listen to. Now, below us, if you look around, you'll see what I think of as the participant swarm, or what used to be called the audience. If you look around at my chunk right here, I can see Kevin, I can see Tom, I can see Robbie. I can also see silhouettes of people like Saeed, Susan, Anne, and Mark. So you can just watch all those people. And if you want to talk to one of them, just double click on them. And if they want to talk to you and their technology works, your two icons will click together like Lego bricks, and you'll have your own private audiovisual bubble. Now, there are a lot of ways to participate, and let me just take you through the three big ones. Check the bottom of the screen out. There's a white strip running along it that has a whole bunch of buttons. On the left edge, you'll see the first button. There's a number. Right now we have 61, and has a little kind of cartoon dialogue box on it. If you click that, up will pop two different boxes. On the left, you'll see a box that looks like an old school film strip. It has a whole bunch of different faces and names of people. So if you just mouse over someone, like if you mouse over Daryl Murdoch, you'll see he's a senior engineer. Or if you mouse over Vanessa Vale, she's an individual and awesome like that. So you can get a quick glimpse at everybody who's involved. Now, to the right of that is a chat box. If you click there, you'll see already we're arguing about the weather, about just how hot it is in Ohio and how much rain the Northeast is going to get. Chat box is a chat box. It's a great place for quick, informal discussion. And you'll see during the next hour that people will use it for that. In fact, people will often think out ideas or questions they want to ask. If they're having issues with bandwidth, they'll sometimes pose a topic there. And if we mention a website or an article, you'll see people often cite URLs right there. So that's a pretty handy thing. Now, back to the white strip. You'll see next to the chat box button is a question mark with a circle around it. If you click that, up will pop a little box, and you can type in a question or a comment that you want us to display. So when the time is right, we'll flash it on the screen so everyone can see it, and I'll read it out loud so everyone can hear it. Now, next to that button is a raised hand. If you click that, that tells us that you'd like to join us up on stage. And that's easy. If your microphone is working, if your camera is working, and you're in a space where you can talk out loud, then click that and you can join us on stage to ask us questions. That's the most interactive option. It's really easy to do. In fact, it takes less time to do than it did for me to explain just now. So those are three big ways. In the course of this conversation, I'll be asking questions of our guests, but you will all have many more questions, comments, thoughts, and examples. Please use one of those options to participate. We're grateful to Shindig for making this technology possible. Thank you. We're also grateful to another source of support and inspiration, which is our supporters on Patreon. So if you haven't seen Patreon, it's a crowdfunding site like Kickstarter or GoFundMe, and it lets you support someone making creative stuff. In that case, the creative stuff is our work here with the future of education and technology. And if you haven't been to it before, look at the very bottom left of the screen. You'll see a bunch of widgets, and one of them will be Support the Future Transform on Patreon. Click that, or just go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander, and you'll find a whole bunch of ways that you can support. As little as $1 a month just to keep the lights on, the machines humming. You can see here some of our leading contributors are folks like Tom Hames, Michael Slade, Chris Lott, Michael Haggins, Jeannie Kim Hahn, Paul McConaughey, Kyle Johnson, Bob Johnson, no relation, Corey S., Robin DeRosa, lots of great people who keep everything going. We're really grateful to them, and we hope you can join them. So that's how we support all of this. That's how the technology works. That's the purpose of it. Let's dive into this week's topic with this week's guests. I'm absolutely chuffed to bits, as the British say, to have this week's guest. We have Maya Georgieva, who's from the New School in New York, and we have Emory Craig, who's also from New York at the College of New Rochelle. Both of them are principals of Digital Bodies, which is on the web, in the world, the place to go to learn about augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, and education. They are, for my money, the two world's leading gurus. If you're looking for thought leaders, if you're looking for people plugged into this world of virtual reality, et cetera, in education, Maya and Emory are the two you want to go to. So it's an especial honor to have them up here today. They're also longtime friends of the program, and we're really grateful to them for their hour. So let's haul down this slide, and let's bring up our two guests. And if you're just joining us, by the way, if you haven't had a chance to yet, introduce yourself in the chat box. Just say who you are and where you are today. And speaking of where you are today, Maya, are you at your office?
Hello, Brian. Yes, I'm in my office on Fifth Avenue. If the sun wasn't as bright, I would have had my shades up, and you can see sort of some beautiful, actually, architecture and building high on the 9th floor in New York City. But we'll leave that for the next time, maybe winter season or something. But so good to see you, and so excited to see so many of you joining us today to talk about XR and the future of education.
So glad to see you, and I'm sure you can bring us illumination in all kinds of ways. Speaking of illumination, Emory, where are you today?
I am in my office up at the College in New Rochelle, New York. So, yeah, just outside of New York City. On the background, you can see my historic railroad posters that are there from the 1940s and 1950s, which are just wonderful examples of Hispanic art, and also some colonialist attitudes still alive and well at that time. But, you know, it was another era of technology and transportation, and it was transformative of the world back then, just as our technology is now.
That's a fantastic comparison. You know, railroads were huge. They were shocking. They made an awful lot of money. They changed politics and society.
Yeah.
Sounds a little familiar.
Yeah. Yes, it does, doesn't it? I know. Nothing is that new, right?
In some ways, no. Well, to begin with, let me ask you all, if you could you please just tell everybody what it is that you work on, what it is that you do?
Go ahead, Maya.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with where I am today at the New School. I'm the Director for Digital Learning at the New School, which is basically being also Director for Digital Learning of all of the 5 colleges. The Parsons School of Design, the School of Public Engagement, the School of Social Research, Lang, which is our liberal arts college, and the School of Performing Arts. So it is a great playground to be. But in addition to that, I'm also leading immersive learning and research at the X Reality Center. And the X Reality Center at the New School is focused on bringing the creativity and the critical thinking and all we have here at the new school, and playing with virtual, augmented, and mixed reality, and thinking about the future of communications and the future of storytelling.
Fantastic. Welcome. And Emory, how do you introduce yourselves to people these days? How do you explain yourself?
Oh, that's hard. I wear so many hats, right? We'll start with the first one, and where I am right now in my office. I'm director of e-learning at the college, and we have 4 schools and 5 different campuses. So that kind of puts me around all over the city, over the metropolitan area. And I'm, as director of e-learning, responsible for the instructional technology and many of the innovative projects that we are working on. And of course, pushing forward immersive technologies here at the college.
Yes, excellent. And of course, many of you know us as the co-founders of Digital Bodies. Digital Bodies Immersive Learning is something that Emory and I co-founded 5 years ago. We first started as just writing and presenting jointly, and then soon after, following one of South by Southwest EDU conferences, which is where I guess you get to start up your on a number of different levels. We actually decided, let's make it official, and we've been on the web now for a really long time, talking about AR, VR, MR, and at digitalbodies.net.
Yep.
Excellent. Friends, if you have any questions about how they do their work, please, this is one thing to ask. These are 2 really unusual people in fantastic situations. But I'd like to ask about the technology right now. We're used to virtual reality. We're used to augmented reality to a degree. We're just getting used to this idea of mixed reality, even if we're not sure what to call it, if it's mixed reality or extended reality, or we'll just call it by a product name like HoloLens or Magic Leap.
Right.
In 2018, right now, where is higher education with all this stuff? Are there just a lot of pilots peppered around the place? Are there any major programs you want to share, or any early signs of where all this exploration is going?
Yeah, so definitely what we're seeing with Emory, which we're excited to see, is that there's definitely sort of a wave of projects and a wave of opening VR and AR and MR and labs, like future labs that focus on this new emerging technologies in higher education. Obviously, there's been some folks and some programs, research universities who've had that, who, just kind of rekindling those programs, or have gone back into gear after some winter, dreams. But what's exciting to see is that whether you're on a small campus or on a mid-sized campus, or any campus, I think there's somebody now, I feel, in our institutions that is thinking and is exciting about VR and is asking, can we get an HTC Vive or an Oculus or something to try? And we're seeing that, and this is how things start. Maybe some folks are about 6 to 12 months ahead of that. There's definitely a wave of programs and centers or groups that started perhaps last fall, but this is generating our own sort of excitement in education, and particularly higher education, with this technology that is definitely kind of like a wave transferring across the community.
Yeah. I mean, you have everything from the high-end research labs at Stanford, at University of Maryland, Chicago, elsewhere, to smaller labs that are just getting underway, to other areas where people are just experimenting. So I think you really have to say in higher education, we're just kind of all over the place, from, just starting out to advanced institutions that have been doing a great deal of work for a number of years. So.
I think it's generated a lot of interest. We can see it just from the kind of like questions and publications that are coming up.
Yeah.
We're resurfacing, there's a lot of resurfacing of some of the, some of the work that actually has been happening in professional communities like entertainment or, journalism in the last 2 years. Are now coming to education. So we're seeing, a lot of interest in virtual reality simulations or games. We're seeing sort of on the storytelling, sort of similar projects like the New York Times 360 videos coming up. So I think there is what we saw, kind of that initial interest in the creative industry, which really is kind of predated what is happening in education with about 2 years. We're seeing that coming to education and sort of really people thinking about those projects and kind of even going back and understanding, well, how did the Times do this? Or, what does it take to put together a team? What does it take to put together an initiative or a project around some of these issues? And on the other hand, with modeling in 3D, we're seeing a lot of that, just kind of how do you even get started? Which is all good things, because I think the one thing that dominates our conversation, my conversation with Emory daily on this, is we just have to get started. We just need to get started working on it. That is the way forward.
Yeah. And the thing that's so fascinating here, and I just love so much about it, is that you see these initiatives and this enthusiasm coming up all over the place. I mean, it's obviously there in Hollywood. People are trying to figure out what they're going to do with the technology, and they range everywhere from, we can't use this to tell a story, to, oh, this is utterly amazing what we're going to be able to do with this. You see museums jumping on board and doing absolutely incredible projects with it. And like Maya said, journalism also. I mean, the New York Times plunging in years ago and taking the initiative on this to say, we're going to do a 360 VR film short piece and roll this out and give everybody Google Cardboard, just ship them to all our print subscribers. And, when you have at the time, what was 160 something year old institution say they're going to do that, that's just absolutely amazing.
Really
I think we're also seeing another, and just kind of to add to this, because I think it's kind of like it's dominating enough that there is its own kind of group of projects around historic sites, and in particular, looking into, bringing students to architecture, understanding urban space from the last century, and being able to transpose this into, today's time. Looking into the concept of urban settings or cities or historical site in context, something that Grinnell College has undertaken a big project in understanding sort of the plantation around Louisiana and kind of modeling that, and a multifaceted, multidisciplinary project. So I think there's sort of that sort of in terms of digital humanities. We're definitely seeing kind of an interest in modeling a number of different 3D environments, moving away from just what was kind of like the initial take on STEM. STEM was, which those initiatives are now, kicked in gear and going successfully, biology, chemistry, physics. But what has been interesting to see, I think this year, is that we're seeing a lot more digital humanity and storytelling kind of applications and questions. And in some projects are starting and have been in some sort of, pre kind of launch process and in development, and others I think are about to start.
This is definitely the wave is beginning to rise. Let me walk you back through a couple of these, and I would love to hear as well from everybody else, because I'm sure you all have questions. If some of you are exploring this technology right now where you are, either privately or at your institution, and some of you may be not exploring and you're curious about how to get started, and some of you may be seeing some interesting projects. So please, this is a great time for questions. I just want to walk back to one piece where you mentioned modeling in 3D. It seems from what I've seen that there's a lot of consumption of VR and AR, but not as much production. Where are you seeing production being done, and what are the big production tools right now?
Oh, well, obviously Unity is probably the major productivity tool to be used, but there's other easier tools to get started with. What's so fascinating from our work is that we've been doing a lot of work in higher education, but also in middle and high schools, and the kids just gravitate toward Unity so quickly. I mean, they're just like, they experience this stuff and they're like, how can I learn this? What do I need to do? And they just, they go out and they learn Unity on their own. They go, oh, I'm already starting to do that. I just go watch the videos online, or I'm going to figure out a way to take a free course. And, if we go back to the school later on, somebody comes back to us and say, yeah, I know Unity now. I'm doing that. I can do that. So, that's really where it's taking off. Unity's has gotten easier and easier, and will get easier still. I think we're going to see a lot of new productivity tools come up. I mean, if you look at the history of the web, of web design, there was a time where people were told, well, you really need to go out and learn Dreamweaver if you're going to do sites on the web. And very few people learn Dreamweaver these days. I mean, yes, you can if you want high-end stuff, really high-end, but the reality is WordPress is a nice full-featured platform, and most people can do exactly what they need to do using something like WordPress or Drupal. So and I think we're going to see the same thing with VR. Yeah.
So right now we're in HTML hand coding, and we should be looking for something like arachnophilia.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Please, Maya, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just amazing to see what Unity and Unreal Engine can do in terms of 3D modeling, and both have been, nice to us in higher education, that they're free for non-commercial projects, and our students can easily access those tools in terms of starting in modeling. And we need to provide the support. I think that what Emory just mentioned, I kind of want to stress that it's easier today to teach Unity in high school than it is in college. Basically, as I kind of worked with high school students and had that opportunity, they're excited, and they're not tripped by just the overwhelming work that needs to take place. They kind of see that as a challenge.
They just dive into it, yeah.
Right, they just dive in, and just the questions keep coming, and eventually the questions keep coming that they need to go and do this on their own.
Right.
In college, as we have, things that work out in semesters, things that work out in particular time frames, and, other ways, that, kind of brings another level of how do you do this in practice, when realistically, what I can say, I feel is like you need possibly around 6 weeks to onboard somebody comfortable on Unity. Talking 6 weeks, twice a week, somebody's spending time. Of course, in some environments, this could be accelerated, say to 3 weeks. In some environments, you could do a big, long weekend boot camp, right? But we do need to provide this onboarding for our students. And actually, I think that is across the line, even if students who do have some coding or some more technical background. Of course, it works best when pairing, but pairing them and doing various other ways. I do think that in my experience, one of the best ways to these early projects to actually be outside of the curriculum, rather than putting sort of the stress of the project being a curriculum project, which then students kind of have this sizing of what can I attempt and successfully accomplish. So I think sort of having that free to play experience is very important in getting excited and familiar and not intimidating by this overwhelming experience early on. And most students at any level find it very fascinating to see their things in 3D. Of course, there will be other tools. Amazon is kind of like has their tool. There are a couple of other platforms that are more just bringing 3D objects, and which in some schools and I know some settings people are using them to model, to do that. So these are not the only entries into creating in 3D, but we always think about, well, what students do. Students should know the tools that are the tools of the professionals. And today, the tools of the professionals are Unity and Unreal.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you think institutions should provide quick access to people to play with these, to try them out. On the other hand, institutions also have to prepare, basically to train people for a 6-week period so they can become competent at generating content through Unity or Unreal.
Yeah, it needs to be, I mean, how as I said, how people choose to provide it. I'm basing that 6 weeks on a on a twice a week experience. If you do
Mm-hmm.
3 times
Mm-hmm.
or 4 times a week, it goes down to like 3 weeks. If you do 72 hours Friday to Sunday, sort of marathon, it comes down to 3 days. But the bottom line is that we need to provide mentorship and coaching and way in support in these early experiences, and that pays off. I think
Yeah.
great.
Right. But the other thing that we've seen happen here too, just over the past year and a half, is that the 360 cameras have gotten so much easier to use. I mean, you go back a couple of years and you're going to shoot something in 360, well, then you had to do post-production. Somebody had to put it in Unity or some other kind of program. And now we've got consumer off-the-shelf cameras that, they'll do basic stitching for you. It's not perfect, but it's good stuff. And something like the Insta360 is a great camera. Maya, I think you recently did a project with a faculty member using that camera, right? And it's just, it creates a really decent project. And you go, just in a year and a half to 2 years, we've gone to that. 2 years from now, those cameras are going to be so much better than they are even now in terms of, just sort of putting something together. So.
Yeah. And I think the critical question here is where I started, because I do a lot of the 360 storytelling, kind of workshopping and design thinking in a number of different ways, is why in 360 video? Because I think that is the critical question we should be all asking. Why go to 360 video? And if you can do it in all other ways, through flat video or to web or to other ways, it's probably something else you need to do. It's probably you have to think, you have to push yourself further down. I think that because we see ourselves more or less as an advocate for people to try and invest time and do things. And oftentimes, if you try things that you can easily do in flat video, you can post on YouTube. Of course, it's so much easier. You can just get your phone and do it. I think, and that's very recognizable by our students and by our faculty. And so the project should have that element where 360 video really brings an additional facet and dimension. And this is when all of us get excited. This is when you kind of scratch the medium. It's too early to say where we are with the medium, but you kind of feel that feeling and you want to do more.
Well said, Maya. We have a question from Daryl Murdoch, who wants to join us. So let's see if we can see Daryl. Daryl, can you hear us?
I can. I've unmuted myself. Can you guys hear me?
Perfectly.
We can hear you, and there's a nice view out your window.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's. I have no idea what this plant is. It's kind of funny. My mother at one point in time literally decided she was going to pull it all up, and within about a month after she pulled it all up, it all grew back. So I just left it.
It just grew back. So just leave it, right?
Yeah, whatever. It wants to live. So I'll do a Jeff Goldblum and say, we'll make it happen, right? So Ed, thank you for taking time today. And my question really, it's fascinating discussion. So I work in an environment dealing with a lot of pilots and prototypes. And so we use the lean startup methodology for dealing with pilots and prototypes, right? So the whole idea there is you create what's called an MVP, a minimal viable product. And you basically just test a bunch of assumptions. So I'm curious, in your teaching of how to use new technology, either have you considered or are you currently using lean startup methodologies?
Yes, we've used elements from lean startup all along with design thinking and various other prototyping methodologies. But yes, definitely build on that experimentation and definitely build on, if you're going to include that in your project and you're going to have to make something move in a particular way, you better try this early on and see how it's going to work. And reiterate on it. And I'm often quoted as saying, if you're going to flip pancakes in VR, you're going to have to flip them early on, parts of it, and then keep getting better at this. It's also many projects as we conceive them, and even as team conceive them, have a lot of you start and it's by nature, but because we are very conditioned by using traditional media, all the different kinds of media we consumed in our education or in our life. So it really is takes time to take flight with VR and AR. We kind of tend to, even with students and younger students, I see that we tend to kind of replicate or go for familiar concepts. So to break free, it takes a lot of those kind of lean methodology, design thinking, prototyping. We use a lot of that to move away from, sort of some of the more, practices we've had, sort of representations we've had, to move into a real 3D. So, but the short answer is yes.
Oh, it's a great question.
Yeah, thanks. It is. I think it's always challenging for us, as Maya pointed out, and I think you're alluding to break free of older technology paradigms and to move into this. One of the things I love about living in New York City, of course, is we're overwhelmed with tourists. You see this all the time, which means you always see tourists taking pictures of themselves in front of various sites. That for us is just a background of our everyday life. But, even though people have smartphones, and even though all photographs are digital, we still tend to take our photos as if we're using film cameras and do the hold still, wait a minute, wait, keep waiting for the right moment to take the picture, when really you should just snap off 10 pictures and then delete the 9 that you don't like, instead of waiting for the perfect moment. But,
right, but how many of us actually go through the process of deleting those other 9?
Well, that's the thing we don't. Okay, so then we just end up with them all on Google Photos. Right, that's true. You're right.
My Google Photos, gets full, and I've got to go buy another, couple gig of storage, right?
Same here. You're right. But that's kind of it, it's just like, it actually is easy to just take a bunch and delete, but we don't think that way. We still think the old way of we have to get the perfect moment in a photograph.
Yeah, well,
I do think. Go ahead.
There's a lot of discovery.
There's another piece to this, right? There's another piece to the question, which is really for whom are the new technologies being learned? Is it for the learner, or are they trying to apply it to something specific so they can, solve a problem? Because if you're in the solve a problem mode, then, how often and how frequently and how many people are they talking to that are going to be the recipients of the end product?
Yeah.
Right? Because it really comes down to, you can build whatever you want, great, but you don't even know if it's going to work. So that's why I was really asking about the MVP, is if the students are learning a particular technology and it has a specific application, instead of guessing based on their experience, are you actually having them engage with end users? And I'll step back at that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a number of projects where it's a combination between university and K-12 institution or high schools institutions, where graduate students are trying to create something for being in the K-12 experience. And so in this case, you have a particular case, which is you're working to create this modeling or this concept to share, to be used in this particular environment. So this is one way. But there's of course the way where we want to, this technology is rapidly evolving. So we want our students to just keep trying these things, because chances are, whether if they're freshmen today, in 4 years as they leave school, everything would have changed. And hopefully, everything would have gotten better. But having tried those many things just with other technology, it gets you equipped. You get sort of the sense of how things move. You get to understand of how what works based on user experience, based on user design. Right. So just as we've learned so much about video, and we felt like I was a film student in 2004, and I was worrying so much about video. Well, social media didn't exist in 2004. The idea that video became conversational, is a completely new concept that I had to basically continue to learn and master, and I've been excited to do so. But having that foundation of understanding how the evolution of film has helped me understand how we, know how to communicate. So basically, the truth is that yes, some of these tools will continue to evolve, and our students will continue to adopt and use new tools. but that experience is invaluable.
Thanks, guys.
That's a terrific question. And what a passionate and detailed answer. Again, friends, I mean, we have Maya and Emory here because they are this deeply skilled, this deeply knowledgeable. We have another question coming up in just a second. But again, if you have any comments or thoughts, please, this is a great time. You can tell that we're pretty informal and I think pretty welcoming. If you have any questions, if you can't make the video because of technical limitations, please just use the question mark to get a question in, or use the chat box. I just learned that my chat box window is only seeing about a third of you all. So if I missed some of you, please, I'm sorry. If you want to shoot me a note directly, I can show you how to do that in just a second. We have Paul Borkowski, but I think we can only hear him and not see him.
Oh,
here he is.
Hello,
Paul.
There he is.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me join in. I have a question about a program that was distributed called Second Life. Some of the universities act. How does that fit into the research?
Oh my!
I'm going to jump in and I'll let Emory speak because I just
jump in.
So Second Life, there is now a project sensor. There is a VR project out there, which is called Project Sensor, which is kind of the next iteration of Second Life in virtual world. In addition to that, there is another project called High Fidelity, which takes on Second Life. I think the co-founders, and so there are two projects at the moment that are kind of building on the same foundation, essentially following what used to be Second Life in High Fidelity is something that we have played in at the new school. And just actually this week, I was in High Fidelity with some students and people from Australia and working on a project around performing arts. So these projects exist. The avatars are now moving and walking, and you can, if you have the hand headset like the HTC Vive or the Oculus, it's mapped in space, and your avatar is much more animated. They simulate talking, and they simulate to a degree some emotion. And so, but you can, meet with people in a virtual space with your sort of customized avatar if you have the access to the high-end VR headsets. And there are
All right,
people
thank you.
slow to take, I have to say, because these projects have been kind of rumored in the rumor mill and been talked about, and some publication in media for the last 2 years. I think we're getting to the point where some interesting things are beginning to happen.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, I really think that, Second Life was very innovative in its day early on, and we had some faculty here at the college do some stuff on it. But, as time went on, kind of lost its way with the economics of it, some people making a ton of money off of other people. And I used to always laugh at it because many of the institutions that built campuses in Second Life built the exact same thing that they had in real life. They just replicated that all over again. And I was like, well, this is the perfect space to try something different. And then what do you see? The virtual replication of your Gothic architecture on campus. And it's like, we have trouble thinking outside the box here. So, but I think what's coming out of it now is some very interesting stuff. So we'll have to see what happens. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So we have some more questions that have come in through various channels. If you can, please join us. I have we have a text question, and let's flash the text question up so that everyone can see it, and then I can read it. This is from the great Frederick Bashir. Hello, Fred. Here's a lesson plan that may work for VR, AR, MR courses today. What do you think? It was developed by Professor Donna Cox, University of Illinois. It's data visualization, a course series, 2 semesters. I think there's more than this. That's the intro. Data visualization course, half computer science majors and half fine arts majors. First semester, learn each other's crafts. Second semester, do data visualization project. Nice. Second semester, do data visualization project for nearby supercomputer center.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely, some of you may be familiar with our, a learning series we've published. We've always said, mix up the teams, get people from different backgrounds. So already, thumbs up that the professor is doing that, is actually proactively putting together students from social sciences, perhaps arts, and others, liberal arts and others backgrounds with technical students. That is a good mix to start. It's also like, she's taking into consideration this takes time for students to get comfortable in building things. Definitely the right way to go. And certainly giving them the time to kind of get comfortable, evolve some of these concepts, because in the learning they'll start thinking about that project, and already kind of already being in somewhat of a prototyping mode. So it's great, and then be much better in actually pursuing a more viable proposal, a more kind of full-featured proposal. And then obviously with teaming up with industry is great. We see a lot of that in New York City. We see a lot of that with the research university in the city. So I think that this is a great example, and thank you for sharing. And it is I think a good way to start.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that excites me most about VR is not the technology, but the way that it's been bringing people together from different disciplines. We all know we tend to be very siloed, and if you're teaching in one area of the college or university, it's very hard to say let's hook up with 10 students from an entirely different discipline. And we just see that happening all the time with VR projects, and I just really love that takes place.
Well, that's a really good answer. And Fred, as always, has a very deep, thoughtful question. We have another question, too, from Roxanne. Hello, Roxanne, great friend of the show. I'm so glad you're here. How do you envision faculty evaluating student learning when using 360 VR-based projects, etc.? Oh, great question.
Oh, Roxanne, thank you for that question. That is excellent. Okay. I mean, I even say to my students, how do you do your own evaluation of a 360 video? And, we talk about how you have to go through it maybe 3 or 4 times, because when you go through it one time, you don't see everything that takes place in it. You're only seeing maybe one part, or you're turning around, but then you miss whatever you were looking at before. It requires multiple viewing, or maybe it requires group viewing. I mean, how we kind of roll this out in terms of faculty evaluation, I think that's just an absolutely wonderful challenge that we have, and that's putting us into a completely different territory than we've been before. Maya, you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Roxanne. I know you've been you've been experimenting, and certainly a great following in various conversations on social media, which you always. So I think that so we have to meet the faculty and student and this new technology somewhere halfway, right? So it is, as we, this is part of the iteration, part of like some of the things we know work in multimedia projects, and some of the things that will slightly change as we go along. Now, for multimedia project, from purely instructional design perspective, what we've used for now the last decade in digital storytelling and other projects, we've used a number of different rubrics. And the rubrics, that give an opportunity for, the grading to not happen on one particular part of the project or part of the engagement, but to take into account what goes into these projects. And, what goes into, students creating, so there's different literacy that we're looking at. Are we looking for, sort of which parts of the literacy? Is it the storytelling? Is it the art? Is it the social context that we're looking at? And as those projects are designed, this should take into account, and not just the craft. And in some cases, it is the craft. So, and obviously bringing peer review is one way, bringing the students, taking sort of ownership in participating in assessing these projects. I would also say, having multiple sessions for feedback. so that this is not kind of something undefined or project, right? You want to have the opportunity for people to learn as they go. And so bringing that feedback sessions early on and throughout, as you know, as students can actually capture that, kind of rethink, reflect, and incorporate that feedback and go forward. I think the 360 medium allows us to do that. It's tricky because, you know, with 360 camera, there's very limited editing. And
Right.
at this time, or editing is somewhat actually introducing editing in the process takes a whole lot of, you know, takes actually, you know, more time and you have to think around it. So, but in the prototyping process, in the planning, one of the things with 360 video planning actually is a big part of it. You know, how do you think about where you go, what you're going to shoot, how things will be located. As we said many times with Emory, it's partly theater, partly choreographed dance. And so
Yeah.
it depends a lot, you know, who's introducing, what is the context, what curriculum, what course, the makeup of, you know, of the students inside it. But I think taking into account all these stages. And of course, you can get there before having students really experience some good 360 storytelling from different genres.
Yeah.
You know, for me, in VR, you can't just talk from text or, you know, like you really have to, you know, ask these students to sample and be immersed in those projects before even they start their own making.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always found in my courses when I have students do 360 projects that the peer review process really helps a lot because, I mean, I can always evaluate it in terms of what I ask students to do, but when we do final projects in a course and students bring these in, I will always be struck a couple of times by something that I didn't like so much, but just absolutely grab the students in the room and make me go back and look at it again, or something that I thought was very fabulous. And for everybody else in the class, they're all being polite, but I can sense this just flopped completely. This just did not go over well. And I go, well, I had my perspective on it, but then now that I look at it as them doing a project for an audience, that they didn't really grab the audience in the way that they should have. So that peer review process is very helpful. So.
Oh, that's excellent. I was going to ask you about some pedagogies, and you just rolled one out based on assessment.
There we go. Right, yeah, right.
Well, let's bring up Maria Anderson. Maria, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Hi. Great.
I had a question like 40 minutes ago, but I don't remember what it was anymore. So I'm going to go with your question.
Okay.
I'm curious how you guys tackle the question of accessibility when it comes up. I know how we kind of were thinking about tackling it at a former institution I worked at, but I want to hear what your answer is.
Good question for VR, etc.
It is still an issue, and it's a big issue. It's a moral issue, and all of us as an education community really need to push the hardware vendors on this really, really hard. And even on the most basic level of like motion sickness, I will always be surprised. Every couple of semesters or so, I'll have a student that gets into the HTC Vive and goes, I just can't do this. I have to sit down. I absolutely cannot stand up and walk around in this because I'm getting dizzy. And I mean, that's an issue. And we're going to have to, I mean, there's some interesting experimental projects out there. The Cane Troller from Microsoft for visual disabilities. Samsung's been hard at work on this in their X Lab, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. And I still run into it on some kind of basic levels of motion sickness in my classes. So.
This is very challenging on all levels. You know, obviously, in any kind of educational settings, you have to be inclusive and be mindful of all kinds of learners and you know what they come with. Now, obviously, for the more visual experiences, just as we've done with other video, there's always a text description, and unfortunately, you have to default to that until there's more. There are very interesting projects in the works, and I do think that some of these new technologies will actually, both with AR and MR and VR will actually bring us a new tool set to actually speak to the, people with various disabilities. Just as some of the projects out there are already in some pilots and some partnerships. But today, the truth of the matter is that if you have a student in your classroom which is visually impaired, you basically default back to having to describe the experience to them in a way that they can access it. And that's basically where we're today. But for some other people, some other disability, it's been amazing to see, because Emory and I have had a number of people now in our workshops on wheelchairs. We also had people severely disabled without no capacity to communicate, just on a wheelchair, on one of, and sadly young students. And, as they walk into, there's always this moment of, how are you going to make this work today? When everybody else is moving and talking and speaking, oftentimes these students have a chaperone. We've put headsets on these students, and it's been amazing. I mean, I'm getting this.
Yeah, I mean, we have had times there's been tears in our eyes. We watched this. It's just been so emotional. Yeah.
Of them, that is so this promise, but today we have very limited resources. That's just true. We could design a little better. There's things around design, but the truth is we're still figuring things out.
Yeah, got a long ways to go, but it's a great question. Thank you.
Early days with a lot of basic ground to cover.
I think it's really a great example that you shared. And I just kind of, what is so hard about accessibility is the idea that I think some people have, that every learning experience needs to work for 100% of the students. I think we always have a variety of learning experiences and allow the conductor of the learning experience to choose from that variety on any given day for what is being done, right? I think if you were in a class of students who were wheelchair bound and had no blind students, VR is going to work great. But to say, don't use VR because you might have, this is going to be like heretical, I know, because you might have a blind student, don't use VR. I think it's the wrong decision. I think if you have a blind student in your class, you do something different, right? Or you come up with different experiences for the whole class in that case, right? But to lock off whole technologies because there might be a student, you have a semester of the 20 years you teach that will be bothered. It's just
it's hard.
It's so disheartening when we do that as educators. And like I said, it's totally heretical, and I'm sure I'm going to get some hate mail, but I just.
That's Maria Anderson, everybody. You know how to find her.
Yeah, I think hate mail to Maria Anderson.
I think that one way, for those of you who, one other way is that audio, the 3D audio, is pretty powerful too. So it depends on the experience. So if you have something which is a 360 video with the 3D audio, and it very well may still work to a degree, right? There will be a degree of variation in that. But I applaud you for saying, don't give up. Look for another way to convey the story, to convey this, and that's the approach we've definitely adopted. We've had these moments when we didn't know. We don't know who. When the students are coming up, that there will be a student with a particular disability, and we just try the tool set. Just as
it's so ironic to me that in education we talk a lot now about personalizing, education to students, and yet we try to plan an entire semester's worth of activity, having never met our students, planning for every edge case student, and then not planning when we actually meet the students we have, right? When we actually meet the students, and this has always bothered me because where I teach, we have a lot of ESL students, right? And the best possible thing for those students would be for me to record the class so that they can watch it after class. But on the possibility there might be a blind student, that can't be done. And even once I meet the class and see that there's nobody who's blind or hearing impaired, I still can't do that, right? Like, that's just crazy, right?
That's true. That is. Yeah.
And so I see VR being kind of the same boat. Like, you guys are in the same boat, right? There's the possibility that you might let a student because of motion sickness or a disability, and so we can't keep doing this.
Maybe we should actually do a session or two with a panel on accessibility in 2018.
On accessibility, yeah.
I mean, I can tell you how we're planning to do accessibility with VR.
Well, we'll come back, but I'm conscious of time, and we have another question that's come in, and I want to bring this up. Thank you, Maria. That's a great question.
Thank you.
It's an important theme. This is a text question that has come in from Thomas Jennings. It says, can you recommend any best practices around safety and security when using VR, AR in a classroom setting? So not on campus, not at home, not in a library, but specifically in a classroom. Good question, Thomas.
It is. Very good question. Maya, you want to?
I like the way Emory deferred to Maya right there. You go ahead.
I defer. Okay, all right. I'll just say number one, clear out the floor. Okay, safety, because people trip over things. And when you're wearing a VR headset, unlike a MR headset, unlike mixed reality, you do not see the world. And if there's anything on the floor, you can trip over it. So number one, you need space. The more space, the better. Whatever space you have, you probably don't have enough. And too often, I go to see a VR lab somewhere, and there'll be a little space in the center of the room for people to do VR experiences, and there's all these chairs around the room. And I go, I just don't know how people do it. Hopefully somebody's watching them the whole time or standing them holding on, because, if not, somebody's going to trip over something. I mean, that's going to happen. Yeah. Security is also an issue. The stuff is incredibly expensive right now. A lot of us have unattended labs. Maybe a card swipe at the door or something like that, and that's it. It's pretty difficult to do with a VR lab at the moment. I think down the road that will get different, but not now.
Yeah, and in terms of the data, I kind of like was starting to say, we don't know what we don't know. That data is collected. We know that. The privacy, state privacy security for these headsets is fairly, minimal and certainly one that helps the companies and not the users. We're tracked in multiple ways. We're tracked in not only how we move, but in the settings we set up these headsets. At the moment, I think as a community, we need to do more because these are very important issues in terms of privacy, in how, obviously we get usual, sort of answers that the data is just aggregated and is used to learn and is used to improve. But we log in with accounts, right? As you use various experiences, you are logged in. So your identity is very much present and available.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This may be, I haven't seen people talking very much about this in education, but this can be absolutely enormous. That's a great question. And I hate to say this, but we've just begun talking about this and we're already at the end of the hour. We have covered a bunch of hardware, software, production, privacy, accessibility, storytelling, and we're just diving into this. And no one has mentioned Magic Leap yet. This tells me, friends, that we need to have you back really soon.
Thank you.
I'm thinking in January or February, so that we can dive fully into mixed reality or extended reality or whatever we want to call it.
Might be a good idea. You're right. We didn't get to talk about Magic Leap today, and it just came out.
It just leaked out. Well, so the best way to find you two is the best way to find you two is through digitalbodies.net, right?
Yeah.
And there's more contact information there. Friends, I want to make sure you find this. And if you have other questions that you would like us to address, pile them in the chat box or email them to me so that we can get going because we have to really cover a lot. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time. Such wonderful, informed, experienced, and passionate answers. This is terrific. Thank you both.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have the conversation with you, and thank you for doing this for the larger community.
Yeah, Thank you so much for everything that you do for the community, and always a pleasure talking with you. And everyone, let's keep the conversation going. Both Brian's side, our side. There's a lot more issues to address here, and we're deeply involved in this. But it's a whole entire community that's going to solve these issues. No one of us. So.
Nicely said. Nicely said.
And now, shameless plug. Please support our South by Southwest proposals, okay? Hopefully we'll have a chance to get in. Yeah, we need to
send me a note on that so I can spread it around.
Okay, sure. All right, thank you. We will. All right.
But don't go away, everybody else, because we have to tell you about what's coming up for the next week. So again, thank you. We are getting a deep dive into where this technology is headed. I am really, really happy to see this. Next week, we shift ground to have Brad Wheeler back on the program. Brad is the head of Unison, which is an unusual inter-university project for educational technology. We had him on a year ago, and although Unison is hard to find out about, he told us quite a bit, and we learned a great deal. This is a really unusual project, and we can learn a great deal this time. So if you're curious about collaboration between colleges and universities, this is a great time to come back. Brad is also one of the world's most important and influential CIOs. So if you're interested in the CIO perspective, definitely come back. Now, also going on next week, we are at the end of our book club reading for New York 2140. We've just finished the last chapter of the book. We'll have another week for reflection on it, but please join us. We've got some great feedback, including New York City's Director of Resilience. Actual fellow shared his thoughts on Twitter about this. So we have a lot of good things to discuss. Now, if you'd like to find that book or other books as well, naturally, our bookstore is waiting for you. The only bookstore in the world devoted to the future of education technology. So please check that out. And if you want to keep the conversation going, as Maya and Emory requested, we have lots of ways of doing it. Remember, we have we have a forum group on Slack. We have a forum group on LinkedIn and another one on Facebook where people have already been posting questions. You can track us all on Twitter or find my blog at brianalexander.org. Keep the conversation going. Keep thinking about the future. Thank you so much for your questions and attention. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.